What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the next part in the Spotify app series. In the last part, we spent some time to put together our compositional layout with these three sections. In this part, we're going to actually build out our custom cells and hopefully get some nice UI showing up instead of just these random colored cells. So that all said, make sure you start by destroying the like button down below. Let's open up Xcode. And no, we do not want to create a new project. That is not what we want to do. We want to jump back into our XC workspace. All right, let me just go ahead and hit run over here to make sure everything is still compiling and working and nothing broke randomly. All right, it looks like it compiled, it is launching, and there is our browse tab. So that all said, at the end of the last video, in views, we created this browse folder, and this has three different cells in it. One for new releases, second for featured playlists, and third for recommended tracks. So if we think about what we actually want to display on each of these, we're going to create a view model object that's going to hold that data. So for this first one here, this is new releases. And if we go back to our models, and if we recall what our new releases response has, I believe it holds an array of albums, which it in fact does. So what we want here is a view model where we can convert some elements from an album, and that view model will basically be the things that we're going to render. So I'm going to come here under the view models folder, and we're going to create a new file to start with. It'll be a Swift file here, and I'm going to call this a new releases cell view model, like that. Go ahead and create it. And this is going to be nothing more than just a struct. And what we want to go ahead and do is take some elements from in here. So if we think about what's going to actually show up on the screen here, we probably want a an image for the album artwork. So we have images here with an API image. So we probably only just want one. So we're going to have one, let's see what's in here, one probably URL for the image, just like that. We're going to want the name of the actual album itself. We might want the number of tracks, and we might want the artist as well. So let me come back to that new view model we just created, and let's put that stuff in here. So first things first, we're going to say name is a string. We're going to want the image. Let's call it album. Let's call it artwork URL, artwork URL. And this is going to be a URL optional, just like that, in case there isn't any, no URL for it. The third thing we're going to want is number of tracks, and we definitely don't want spaces like that. And let's see. And we probably also want something like artist name. We can say artist name. And perhaps we want to show like a small artist, like circular thumbnail. Maybe not. I'm not going to include it just yet. We'll see, once we get there. So this is the content that we are going to need to pass into our cell. Now let's first go and register all these custom cells that we created in our views folder to our collection view. So we didn't really put anything in here. We just had the static identifier constant. So I'm going to go ahead and open up controllers. We're going to come back to our home view controller. And at the top here, wherever we configured the collection view, which is right here, we are going to register three cells. I'm going to copy and paste this register line and paste it 3 times. First one's going to be new releases collection view cell. And the cell ID will be new releases collection view cell.identifier. The next one here is going to be featured playlist collection view cell. And respectively, the identifier will be that class name dot identifier. And last up here, we're going to have track, what did I call it? Recommended collection view cell rather. So we'll say recommended collection view cell. And then once again, the ID will be that dot identifier. So looking pretty good. So we also in here need a way to hold, all of the different section data in an array, so we can actually drive our collection view instead of it being done by these hard-coded values for number of rows and sections. We want to drive it based on the actual number of rows that we have. So the way we're going to do that is we are going to start adding associated values in new in this enum here. So for new releases, we're going to say this has view models in it, which is going to be that new view model we created. So it'll have an array of that. And now what we can go ahead and do is on this actual controller, we're going to have a array called sections. And this is going to be browse section, just like that. And at the top of view did load here, we could configure this model. However, we don't want to do that there, right? We want to do that after we've fetched data. So this fetch data should presumably, at the bottom of it, we might want to configure those models. So here I am going to say, let's just configure it right here for now, configure models. We're going to say sections.append, and we're going to first append in here. There's 3 different section types. The featured one is the second one. The last one here is going to be recommended. And the one that we skipped purposely is the new releases. Now, new releases, we basically want to take every single new release album that we get and convert it into view models. But just bear with me for a moment here. We first want to change this. So number of actual sections that we're going to return is going to be sections.count. And the number of actual rows, rather cells in a section, will be basically how many associated view models it has. So we haven't created the view models for these other ones yet. So I'm just going to go ahead and just copy and paste this one. We're going to be changing the type, at some point. But let's come down here and also tweak this up. All right, let me put that there and put that there as well. So go ahead and hit Command V. Everything should hopefully be compiling. And before we move any further, let's go ahead and write out all of our API calls because we're definitely going to need our data. So what I'm going to do is we want to make these 3 API calls. So the first one here that we have already is for recommended, which looks good. We also want to go ahead and say API caller shared, and we want to get featured playlists. And once again, this has its own results that it returns, just like that. We're going to switch on results. In the success case, we have a model. And in the failure case, we have an error. Let's just say break for a quick second here and write out the first one that we need as well. All right, and this first one here that we're going to need to call is API caller shared, and we want to get new releases. So get new releases like that. Once again, this is going to have a result, and we are going to be lazy and copy and paste this guy like that. Now, the important thing that we need to do is we need to wait for all 3 of these. I guess it's 4 technically if you count this one too. We need to wait for all these API calls to be done before we set up our actual models here with the view models. So how do we do that? So there's something called a dispatch group we can use. And this dispatch group is essentially a way where we can group together multiple dispatched concurrent operations. So this has to do with basically concurrency of multiple API calls. What I'm going to do here is we are going to say group.enter a total of 3 times. And in each of these blocks, what we're going to say is in a defer block, we're going to say group.leave. So basically, whenever we've left the scope of this callback, we're going to decrement the number of group entries that we have. And once it hits an even number, aka group.leave equals number of group.enters, we're going to say group. We're going to notify on the main thread that we are done, and it's going to execute whatever's in here. So pretty simple. So let's go ahead and add our additional group.leave calls. And we'll see what we want to do with this model in a moment in the success. So for this one here, we're also going to want a group.leave. Looks good. And let's see, for this one here, we only want to leave once this inner API call is done. So this one, I'm going to go ahead and instead of calling its result, since we called that result already 5 lines up, I'm going to go ahead and call this, let's call this recommended results. So we're going to say recommended results. And once again, we want to go ahead and switch on here. All right. And this is going to give us a success and a failure, just like every other call that we've made so far. Let's go ahead and put a break here for both of these for a moment, like that and that. And we want to put a deferred and group.leave for this one as well. So we're going to say group.leave. Let me get rid of my antivirus pop-up. Let's say group.leave. Now, what do we actually want to go ahead and do? We don't want to just break here, right? Because that's kind of useless. And we're also getting a bunch of these warnings for the errors. So let's do these one by one. So what we actually want to do is we want to save the model that we get to something that's global in this function. And the reason we're going to do that is because right here in this group.notify, we're going to validate that we have all of the three models that we expect from these three API calls. So this first one here, we are going to say this is var new releases is going to be a new releases response optional. And the reason we do that is because now in the success here, we're going to say this equals the model, just like that. And for the error, we're just going to say print out the error dot localized descriptions. That'll get the warning to go away. And this is going to complain that we're not using it. Just bear with that there. And similar, let's go ahead and copy this print statement. We're going to copy and paste that there. And in this one, the model's type, if you see at the bottom here in the autocomplete, it tells you it's a featured playlist response. So let's go ahead and add that up here. So we're going to say featured playlist. I'll just call it featured playlist. And this is going to be featured playlist response, just like that. And in that API call success, we're going to say the featured playlist is now model. And finally, this one here is going to, let me also add those prints again. So these warnings go away. They drive me nuts. Let's add that there. Let me also add this one here. Control I to align. And in this one, the model's type, if you take a look once again at the bottom here, it is recommendations response. So we are going to say recommendations up here. Recommendations. And this is going to be recommendations response. Now, some people might argue, you might want to put this logic inside the API caller itself. It's a little subjective. I'm just sticking it into the view controller because it'll save us on time. And I think it's easier to follow when you're kind of learning this stuff. But anyways, I digress. So here we have assigned that model. Now, what we can go ahead and do in this notify block, we can unwrap them all. So we can say guardlet releases is new releases. We can also say let playlists is featured playlists. We also want to let tracks, and the tracks are going to be recommendations. Now, actually, more specifically, what we probably want to do is instead of getting just these top level properties, for releases, we want to get new releases, and off of this, we want to actually get albums, which is an array of, I think actually albums as items. We want to get albums.items. That's actually what we want to get. And we can say this is new albums. That's a little more appropriate. Playlist, similar deal. From playlists, we want to go ahead and actually get the items, which is nested inside of playlists. So we're going to say playlists.items. And finally, same thing for recommendations. We are going to say dot, and then from this, we are going to get the tracks dot. Let's see what tracks was once more. This is an array of audio tracks. So that's actually perfect. So we can say tracks. And now that we have all three of these, we're on the main thread, so we can go ahead and configure our actual models. Now, I'm not going to do this in this function because it's a little bit of a big function already. So what we'll do is let's create another function right below here. We're going to say private func configure models. And this is going to take in arrays of different things. So first, we're going to say here, I'm actually going to just copy and paste it, of new albums is going to be an array of album. We're going to have tracks, which is going to be an array of audio track. And what is this one here? This is an array of playlists. So let me go ahead and line break all this jazz to keep it a little organized. And the second parameter here will be playlist, which is an array of, you guessed it, playlist. And now in here, we can go ahead and say self.configure models. And we're going to pass in all this stuff. So new albums is new albums. I guess new releases is what we called it. Nope, it's actually new albums. I take it back. The next one is playlist. So we'll pass that in directly. And this third one is tracks. Now, what we could do, which you're probably kind of getting the idea for already, is we can configure our actual sections here based on this content. So we're going to say for the first one here, we're going to configure the new releases and view models. To actually get this view models, what we're going to say is new albums, compact map, and we're basically going to convert every album into the view model. So we're going to say return new releases view model, and this view model takes a couple of parameters that we have set up. So we're going to say $0.name, that's the first one. The next one is going to be $0.images, images.first.url, and that's actually going to give us a string back. So what we're going to say here is this type should be a actual URL type. So we're going to do that. The number of tracks will be $0 dot, let's see, track number, I think, total tracks, that's what it's called. And this last one here is going to be the artist name. So this is going to be $0 dot artists dot first dot name, and if it's nil, we'll say we'll just put a dash here. So essentially, $0 refers to the element that we're looping over, because compact map is going to loop over, all the elements there, and we're converting from the model to a view model type. Now we're going to need to do this for these here as well, but I've just left them as empty view models. Since we have not created view model types up here, we're just using the only one that we've created. I want to basically get through one section actually working, and that'll drastically help with the understanding of how the other sections work. So let's go back down to that function. If I can find it, here it is. And now what we can actually do is a number of cells in a section, we can go ahead and get a particular section. So we can say that a particular section is basically in here, we want to get it from a section like that. Let's go ahead and say model, and we can go ahead, let's call it type rather, and we can switch on type. And this is going to have, let's see. So this is sections, and we're getting, this should be sections plural. We can switch on type, which will be the 3 different types of sections we have with associated view models. I just hit the error and hit fix, and it automatically added it for me. Let's put a let before view models here. And actually, looks like it did it for us, but that's kind of weird how it did it. So I'm going to delete this redundant view models. And what we're going to return is going to be view models.count, because the number of elements in a given section is the responsibility, the count responsibility of the number of elements for the given view models in that section. So that'll take care of it for every section. And let's see, so down here for the actual cell, what we're going to go ahead and do is, instead of just returning a vanilla cell and when we dequeue it, what we want to go ahead and do is once again get the type of the model out. And based on that, we are going to dequeue different cells. And those are going to be the 3 different cells that we have registered. So I want to copy and paste this switch statement, just like that. That's like that. And we can actually, in fact, let me go ahead and copy this whole thing. We can actually paste it on in here. Let me delete this, this if-else business. And we'll need to tweak it a little bit, but it's not too difficult. What we're going to actually do is we're going to say collection view, dequeue a reusable cell. Just ignore those errors down below for a quick moment. And we're going to try to get the related cell out. So we're going to say this is the new releases collection view cell dot identifier. We're going to try to cast this cell as the given cell that we want. Prefix this as a guard because we want to guard that this cell can be casted as such. And if we're not able to go ahead and get that type of cell, this else should never actually occur. We'll just return a collection view cell. Otherwise, we're going to say cell dot background color is perhaps red. So let's go ahead and copy and paste this into these other blocks here so the errors go away and it stops complaining. So we're just going to change the color as well. So there is blue, and this one I guess will be orange. Just don't forget that you do need to change the cell type here. So this is going to be featured collection view cell, and this one's going to be the updated identifier. And this third one here is going to be recommended recommend the tracks collection view cell. Go ahead and do that. And let's see, why is this yelling at us? Because section doesn't exist. We're going to say this is index path dot section, just like that. And everything should be happy at this point. We'll get some warnings that we're not actually using these view models. And that is correct that we're not using it. We will need to use it in just a moment. We will actually, let's just do it right now rather. So we're going to get the nth view model out. So we're going to say this is the view model, the current view model that we want will be from view models, and this will be index path dot row. Now we just need to configure this cell for that given view model. So let me go ahead and pause and hit Command B. Let's go ahead and fix all the errors that we have, if we have any. Looks like we do. And I want to run it to make sure we didn't botch anything. So first of all, I forgot to add a comma here. So let's fix that, add a comma. Let me go ahead and hit Command R to build and run. Now you'll see cell colors for the top here, but not for the bottom. And actually, we don't even see it from the top. So that's kind of weird. So let's see what the heck is going on. So we should be fetching data. Let's see why we are not. So I'm going to put a print in here. Start fetching data. And let's go ahead and see. So we have an API caller, call there, and call there. So all of that should be good, hopefully. Let me see what we have printed out here. No other prints. And once we're notified here, if all of these aren't nil, we'll say fatal error and say models are nil. A fatal error will just crash your app. Otherwise here, I'm going to go ahead and say configuring view models. Go ahead and give it a run, Command R, and let's see what happens. Something should happen. All right, so we have said here configuring view models. So it's definitely coming into here. The thing we do need to do, which I have promptly forgotten, is a collection view, and we want to reload the data once we have updated the actual models that are driving it. So go ahead and do that. We should see some colors for the cells up here. Hopefully, maybe not. So let's go ahead and print out now the counts that we're getting. So let me print out the new albums.count. Let's go ahead and print out all the other ones as well, playlists and tracks. Let's go ahead and hit Command R. So at least our logic is working up until calling this function, and we have gotten 50 actual, we've gotten 50 albums back. We've gotten 2, it looks like, playlists, and we've gotten 40 tracks. So we have data, so that's not the problem. We append it to this section. We have our new releases. Let's see what else is going on. So we have gone ahead and said number of sections is sections.count, which is great. And for this jazz, we've gone ahead and actually returned those counts. And then here we are casting, we never set a background color. What am I doing? So let me set that background color to red again so we can actually see it. We should be seeing cells up here. There they are. All right, so we should have a total of 50. Now we just need to actually configure it with the appropriate data. All right, cool. I'm sure half of you guys that are watching me make these errors are probably like pulling your hair out because you see the error before I do. So just bear with me here. So cool. So here we've got all of the model configuration jazz. Now we just need to build out our cell. So that said, let me go ahead and jump into the first cell we're going to do, which is this new releases one. And I'm just going to copy the view model in there for a moment in a comment, just so I can see the stuff we're going to need to supply. We're just going to comment it out. You can do command \. So the first thing we're going to want to do in here is override the initializer. And you can override init with frame. You're just going to call the super for it and pass in the frame. And you also want the required initializer. You're going to want layout subviews, because we will need to lay out subviews. We're going to say super layout subviews. And the last one is going to be prepare for reuse. This gets called whenever we want to reuse a cell, which is going to be fairly often. Now what we want to go ahead and do is add a function on here that can take in a view model and configure our cells. So we're going to say configure with view model. It's going to take in our view model type. And in here, we're going to do some configuration business. So if we look at our view model, we need a label for the name. We need an image for the album artwork. We need maybe a label for number of tracks, and we might need a label for artist. Well, rather, we do need a label for artist. So let's go ahead and create that stuff. So first we're going to say album cover image view will be a UI image view. Let's go ahead and do that just like that. We're going to say let image view is a UI image view. Let's go ahead and return it. I'm going to give it a default image, which will be just a system image of, I guess, a photo image, just so we have some placeholder to start off with. We're also going to go ahead and say image view that content mode is going to be scale aspect to fill, so it looks really nice. And then what did I say? We need 3 labels. Let me just create one and copy and paste it. So we'll say private let album name label. Be mindful of what you're calling your properties. I know I've said it 5 times already, but don't just call this label as the top level one. Call it something like an album name label, because it's just a little tricky once you start getting into larger apps and you have a bunch of different labels. It's just like the term label is very ambiguous, and I get so annoyed when I see just like a label and I'm like, I don't know what this is. So go ahead and create that label, paste it 2 more times. The next one here is going to be number of tracks label, and the third one will be artist name label, number of tracks label, and this is going to be artist name label. I'm going to bump the font size down for each of these. Go ahead and tweak it and make it look like whatever you want it to. We'll say that's a regular, and number of tracks is probably not as important, so we can say light, looking good. And let's see, we probably want multiple numbers of lines, so we're going to say number of lines are 0 for both of these, actually all 3 of them. Number of lines 0 basically lets the line text for the label wrap if it needs to. Go ahead and do that. Now in your initializer here, we do want to do a few things. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to say content view dot background color, and let's go ahead and say this is a secondary system background. We're also going to add subviews. So we're going to say add our 4 subviews. So it's album image view. Let's go ahead and copy and paste that. The album name, the artist name, as well as the number of tracks label, just like that. In our configure function here, this one's pretty simple actually. Actually, before that, even doing that, we go ahead and delete this comment. Let's also import SD web image. The reason we need this is because we're going to download the image for the album with a URL that's in our view model. In configure, we just want to configure all of our content. So we're going to say, first up, the album name dot text is going to be view model dot name, pretty simple. The next one is going to be artist name label dot text, and you guessed it, pretty simple, view model dot artist name. Third is going to be number of tracks. So we're going to say number of tracks label. Text is going to be tracks colon view model dot number of tracks, pretty simple. And the last one, and probably the more interesting one, is for the album image view, we are going to say SD set image, and the URL will be view model dot album. Let's see, view model dot artwork URL is what we called it, and completion is nil. Now in our prepare for reuse, we can actually copy and paste it and just nil everything out for each of these. So this will be nil, the text will be nil, this will be nil as well, and this will be nil as well. What this will ensure is when we reuse a cell, we aren't leaking state from the prior cell. Now, what is left to do? What's left to do is actually laying everything out. So the first thing we're going to do here is call size to fit on each of these labels. So we'll say label, size to fit. We'll say artist name label, size to fit, and number of tracks, size to fit. Size to fit will appropriately size that label to fit. We might need to tweak this a little bit, but we'll find out in a bit. We're going to get the image size, which we want to be a square because that's how images look for album artwork. The way we're going to do that is we're going to say content view dot height, subtracting 10 for a buffer on the top and bottom of 5. And what we're going to say here is the album cover or album image view, album cover image view dot frame is going to be CG rect. The X is going to be 5, top will be 5, width will be image size, and will be image size as well. Let's go ahead and actually go back to our home view controller. And in our cell for row here, where we're setting this cell background color as red, we can now say cell configure with view model, which is the function we made. Go ahead and hit Command R to give it a run, and we should start seeing images now. So boom, there are our images. Now, one thing you'll notice off the bat is our text is like super screwed up. So we're gonna fix up that text, not to worry. But it's cool that we now actually have some album artwork appearing. You might want to go ahead and round the corners of this. I like him to be kind of pointy, so we're going to keep it as such. But let's go ahead and fix up this text because it's not doing us any favors. Let's go back to that cell. And let's do number of tracks first. Since this one is probably fairly simple to lay out, we're going to say its frame is going to be CG rect. The X will be the album cover image view dot right plus 10. And now you guys might get an idea of why I had added those computed properties for left, right, top, and bottom. The height is going to be 50. The Y will be the album cover image view dot bottom subtracting 50. And finally, the width is going to be content view, or we could actually just say here tracks number of tracks label dot width, since we did size to fit. The next one we're going to do is artists. So let's see if we can get away with copy and pasting and then just tweaking a little bit. So there is number of tracks. Let me go ahead and do artist right above this. So we're going to say this is the artist label. And let's see let's actually do the name label first. So we'll say album name label. So this one, the X is going to be the same thing. The Y is going to be a little different. We'll say 5 here. And this is going to be this dot width and this dot height. Now I have a hunch that this is not going to look correct and we'll need to adjust it. Let's go ahead and just run and see what we're working with. So there is, let's see. So the number of the tracks and the name looks like they're overlapping or something strange is going on. So let's see what's going on. So album name label, we're saying the X is the cover image right plus 10. The Y should be 50. I did minus 50. It's not what I meant to do. So that'll be the Y. Let's run that one more time. All right, so it's at the top now. You'll see this one is overflowing, which doesn't look too great. We'll fix the overflow by saying content view dot clips to bounds is true. That way anything that overflows will clip to bounds. And we still need it to line wrap. So let's do that really fast. So the way we're going to do that is what we will say here is let album label size is going to be the album label. And instead of saying size to fit, we're going to say size that fits. And we need to supply basically a CG size in here. So the size I'm going to supply, let me first move this image size to the bottom, rather to the top. The size that I am going to supply is going to be content view dot width subtracting image size subtracting 10, and the height will be content view dot height subtracting 10. Now these subtractions are basically omitting the space that is available for this label to be used and sized. It's a little bit of math, kind of a little tricky to wrap your head around, but just bear with me. And now what we can say for the label here is we can say this is width and the height is going to be album label size dot height. Go ahead and give it a run. And let's see if we're line breaking. And the last thing we need to do is the artist label. So here you can see that it is line breaking. In fact, we have everything looking good, but now we don't have enough room for the actual artist. So there's a few ways we could fix this. A, we can make the cell taller. But B, what I'm going to actually do is I'm going to maximize the height of the actual name label for the album by saying, take the minimum value. It can either be 80 or whatever the height of the album is, right? So if this exceeds 80, take 80. Otherwise, you can go ahead and take this value. So let's finally do the artist name. So the artist name label, we are going to copy it from right here, right there. Y will be different, X will be the same. The Y is going to be the album name label dot bottom plus 5. And the width is going to be content view width subtracting the album cover image, the album cover image view dot right minus 5. So that'll give buffer from the left and right. Let's go ahead and give that a run and let's see what we're working with. All right, so we've got something going on here. It doesn't look perfect, so some things are overflowing. So this one here, we have Pink Planet. Here's the artist. Here's a number of tracks. That looks okay. This one here looks a little screwed up. So we're saying here is the title, and then the tracks is right there. So let's see what's going on with the height of that. But let me scroll and see what the other ones look like. So there is the title and the artist. The tracks can actually be a little lower. It's like unnecessarily too tall. So we'll say 44, and the Y will be the bottom subtracting. We can maybe say 40. So instead of actually doing that, we'll say content view dot bottom subtracting 44. Go ahead and give that a run. Let's see if tracks is placed more appropriately now. All right, so tracks looks better. It's closer to the bottom of the actual cell, but this is still screwed up. So let's go ahead and fix that. So we're gonna say take the min value of, let's say 50 and album label size dot height, and that should really make it a bunch smaller. All right, we get the truncation, which is good, but the artist label is still screwed up. So what we're gonna say is the artist name label's Y is going to be, it's because we need to move this one. So let's see, we're saying album name label, and that's album name label as well. This is the Y. Let's go ahead and make this its own property. So I'm going to say this is let album label height. We're going to go ahead and move this in here. And what we can say for the Y here now is this is going to be the height plus, this is the artist name label, the height of that plus 5, which is the buffer for the other label, plus 5 more, so plus 10. So let's go ahead and give that a run. Let's make sure it's all looking correct. All right, so this is still overlapping. I'm not entirely sure why. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna debug this together. So I'm gonna set a background color to the artist label, and we're gonna see why that frame is large. So that frame is definitely larger, taller than it needs to be. But what I don't understand actually is why this artist label is farther down. So let me go ahead and set a background color to this as well of, let's say, blue. Pro tip that using these background colors to debug your layout is pretty useful. There's a problem. So the label height is very tall. So the label height of the artist name label, I messed it up here. It's supposed to just be whatever like factor that we want. I'm going to go with 50. That way we can control its height and make sure it's always properly aligned, just like that. So it's 50. It could probably be even a bit smaller. And the height of this will go ahead and adjust. So I'm going to say the height of this up here is going to be the min of 80 like we had before. And the Y of this actually will go ahead and revert it back. We'll say this is the album name label dot bottom. You can just say dot bottom and see what that looks like. The two labels will be touching each other. All right, bear with it. That's certainly not right. So let's see what the heck is going on. So we're saying this should be album name label bottom is what I meant. Give it a try once more. Hopefully 25th is time to charm. It is now screwed up even more. So let's go through this. So the naming is kind of throwing me off a little bit here. So we have first calculated the album size, the album label size. We're doing the image, right? This is simple. We've got the image. The next thing we're doing is the album name label. The X is fine. The Y is going to be 5. We have the width here and then the height as well. So that's perfectly fine. The next one that we want to do, let me take a look at this once more. The next one that we want to do is the artist. So the X again is going to be the same as this. So that's fine. This is album cover image view, which is not what we want. We want this to be the name. That's the one I keep screwing up. And that'll be its bottom. The width looks correct and the height looks correct as well. So that looks good to me in terms of layout. The one obvious issue is that the height of this can be decreased to 44. And we're going to take the min value of 70 instead of 80, just to line break it a little bit more. All right, this is on 2 lines now. We can probably go even smaller than that. Let me try to get away with 60. Let's see what that looks like. Go ahead and give that a run. All right. I think we're looking pretty good. This blue artist label is still kind of tall, so let's see if we can get away with 30. As you can probably tell, I'm like super guessing here as I'm building this out to make sure everything is laid out correctly. And I think we're good now. I think this is actually a little wider than we want it to be. So I'm going to say content view width, subtracting the right of that, subtracting, let's say 10. Let me go ahead and get rid of that red background color, but I still want the blue to make sure that everything is perfect. All right, beautiful. So this is touching the edge here. This looks good. Our album name is in the correct spot, and our artist name is in the correct spot as well. Things are truncating appropriately. And there we are. So let's see, you could probably make this a little thinner, the font for the artist. Let's see, let me go ahead and tweak it a little bit. And you guys can tweak this and make it look however the heck you want. I'm just going to be super particular about it. So if you want to forward the video, by all means, go for it. So we have the album name, which I think we can probably bump down in font to 20. And then the artist name, let's go ahead and make this light. And the number of tracks, I'm going to make that thin and see if that looks any better. Because I feel like the artist name is still a little too dark. I kind of like that better. We kind of have some separation and visual cues between the different things. And as we scroll, you can see that we have all this looking pretty good. So we've got this working. And what we need to do is set up the view models and cells for the next 2 sections. I'm going to cut the video here, though, since it's gotten pretty long. Once we have the next 2 sections good to go, we're going to talk about tapping into these, because right now tapping on them, nothing happens. So thanks for watching. If you haven't liked the video yet, make sure you do like it. Apologies for all of my math mistakes here and laying this out. Definitely leave a comment if you have any other questions. Maybe you want to know if I ever went to math class when I was younger. Clearly the answer is no. Thanks again for watching. I'll see you in the next one.